Okay, I'm here for another episode of Reflections, and this one is with sgares, aka seangares, aka Sean G at Res, whichever he goes by at the moment. It's his choice. He can do whatever he wants. It's very much like the Prince of CSGO in many ways. So, okay, Sean, here's where I want to start this interview, okay? Because we've actually never done an on-camera interview before. So I actually hate interviews. If you ever seen any of mine, people notice a trend that I never do the question of like, how did you get into CS? Like, what was your first hit? I think those are like the most boring questions. But I do have a question for you, okay? Because I know from talking to you that when I remember, because I remember a lot of the players from 1.6, even if they weren't on really good teams, I remember when you were playing in like okay level teams that were at like ESEA lands at the end of 1.6, and you were in all right teams. You were in teams that were like, sometimes might finish like top 4 at ESEA LAN, not too bad. I know that you actually think you were a pretty good 1.6 player though, right?
I did, yeah. I definitely
like individually as well. We're not talking as in-game leader, right? We're talking like individually, seangares, good 1.6 player, good AWPer. These are all true things?
Yeah, no, I swear these are actually true things. There was like lands in the early days of ESEA and like even throughout the seasons where I would definitely be in like the top of the FPR or ADR leaderboards. This was before Steno got a hold of me and introduced in-game leading into my life.
Okay, so actually that's a good topic to talk about because here's the problem, Sean. Not a lot of people know who Steno is. And he's someone who's, I'll say infamous, I won't say famous. He's infamous in the NA community because in the latter days, after all the sort of top tier went to CGS and then most of them just retired or like couldn't get back into 1.6, there was this kind of wasteland, which is when you guys like you came up, where suddenly the top tier of NA were a lot of players who were very inexperienced, And so one of the things that actually the scene lacked for was in-game leaders. I mean, it's ironic because obviously it's the same case in CSGO now. So as a result, people who were worth their weight in gold was anyone who could do the basics of in-game leading. And the thing about Steno was he had a very, let's just say a very specific philosophy on how to be an in-game leader, right? What was it actually like to play them? What did he learn from? Because here's the thing, I've heard differing opinions. Like some people think he was like very set in his ways and he had a very weird way of leading. Some people credit it and say it was very good and he was a proper in-game leader. What was it actually like, do you think? What did he learn?
Yeah, I mean, I thought he was honestly a great in-game leader. He's Ukrainian, so he loved Navi. This is when Navi was really dominant in 1.6. Okay. So like he modeled everything after Navi and he would call himself Zeus. Literally, it was like kind of crazy. Like the the shit he would say would literally just like drive me crazy. But he was very strong as far as like rotations and mid game go, and that's a lot of when I learned how to play CS and holding angles and staying alive in certain situations when it's good to jiggle peek. He was never really someone that would like learn new smokes or like come up with an execute or. You would never like have some strat that would blow you away. It was just, he was great. He was excellent at teaching the fundamentals of the game, and he opened my eyes to a lot of things that I didn't see. So
I heard something strange, like his style of leadership was like you're saying, it's not like he spent a lot of time in the sort of like dry running strats and coming up with some brand new execute. I heard that he was one of those guys who tried to like just read the game 24/7 inside a match, and call stuff on the fly, and like he should be trying to like do that. Is there any accuracy to that?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was just like we'd be running defaults like every round of every scrim and every match, and it was just like he would see something happen, he would just call something on the fly, like or not even maybe on the fly, but like tiny scenarios that we would go over in a server that might never happen ever, and like we'd be sitting in a practice server and everyone would be bored out of their minds, and like I just remember some nights where like Asian would be like. AZN would be minimized playing online poker or something like that. J-Stone would actually come alive during practice and like start dropping guns around the map and then just change his name to like J-Stone's gun shop. And meanwhile, Steno's like acting like none of this is happening and I'm like the only one listening. It's just those days of practice were hilarious, man.
This is killing me a little bit here because here's a topic I want to get into, okay? So like I say, we won't just go through like the first 2 years of CSGO and every LAN because, I mean, a lot of that, the reason why people won't know it is it's not that relevant, like no one really cares what happened at some NA LAN in 2013, right? It's not really that relevant to your career now or CS in general. But one thing about the early days of Cloud9 and complexity when you were the in-game leader is you're saying here this scenario where, like you were one of the only ones listening and Steno was just sort of like, he's given his speech speech and that, but you know, like this happens in CSGO. People are alt-tabbed, people are like fucking on Skype with a girlfriend, whatever. This was what happens, unfortunately, in NA CSGO. Isn't this what happened to you? I mean, this is one of the things that boggles my mind, Sean, that nothing became the in-game leader. Because he's the ultimate, like, example of the guy where if this was like a movie, okay, he's like the guy in the class who's always got the dunce cap on and like is never listening and is getting sent out the class. You know, this is the guy who never listened in the practices, right? Wasn't that kind of what it was like for Sean Gares at some points in time? It sounded like that's something that frustrated you, right?
I know, right? How ironic that the guy that like, I don't know. I became Steno. No, I'm just kidding. No, actually, Jordan put in a lot more work than a lot of people believed. I admit, when I played with him in the early complexity days and even the early parts of Cloud9, he was a big problem as far as his like dedication goes and his efforts put into the game. That stuff came from his time in EG, like towards the end where Tommy was his leader and stuff like that. Like he always had those problems in 1.6. But eventually I think he felt the pressure of like Spencer wanting to cut him. He felt this pressure, this immense pressure to like, he was on the hot seat and he had to learn like how to get himself out of that. And he basically would stay up in boot camps with me like till 5 a.m. trying to find smokes and like weird stuff. Because I mean, something about me is I have like a very logical brain. Like I operate, and I think this is why I liked Steno so much as a leader, is I operate in a way where like I like to piece together stuff like on the fly, like in a logical way. Shit, I gotta exit mumble. And I needed someone like creative, like Jordan or Corey, or in this team I have Frost, Carey, my coach. Basically people that can find like creative smokes and stuff like that, because what I like to do is I like to learn the game. I like to study the game and break down the metas and the teams that I'm playing against. But I don't really have that creative side to me per se, where I can look at it, I can like throw a smoke in a server and like kind of like envision a whole thing around. Like I can, like if someone gives me a smoke, I can create a strat around it and I do it. Like I've actually done it very recently on several maps where I'll find a smoke myself and I'll like create a strat around it. But it's not necessarily my strong suit. I'm a lot more logical and lack that creative side, I think.
So okay, when you were the in-game leader of these two teams, the complexity then leading into Cloud9, which is obviously a little bit different, like different players eventually. When you were in the early days leading up to this team of complexity and then like the first Cloud9, let's say before Hiko leaves, basically this sort of time period, like what was the actual process like being the in-game leader of that team? Like I've heard along the lines of what we're talking about here, I've heard that like practice was really not fruitful at all. Like, I mean, one of the things, unfortunately, that a lot of people have said about SEMPHIS over his career is he's someone who doesn't practice properly. Like, he's the ultimate example of the guy where, I mean, I always gave the analogy to Hiko that SEMPHIS is like the guy who, unfortunately, if he gets bored of things or he doesn't like the way the opponent's playing, he will sort of short circuit the in-game leader. Like he'll just be like, "No, let's just do this now," like, or he'll just do something stupid, you know, run up with a shotgun on middle of Inferno or something, and it'll kind of like that's not good practice, you know. It's not gonna get. That's not if you're the in-game leader. That's kind of working against what you're trying to do there. So, did this team ever have like proper routine of practice and stuff? Did you ever get proper scrims in? And like as an in-game leader, was it good enough for you? Could you get them to do the executes and stuff, or were you having to do a lot of in-game stuff? Like you watch the demos and then you try and call the thing in game. What was it like?
It's weird. Back then, I've evolved so much as a caller, and I think I was a lot worse back then than I am now. Back then, I would watch a lot of demos and stuff. Still, I'd come with strats to practice. Maybe like Jordan would like create some like crazy, quirky strat. Corey would like bring a lot of strats to practice, and we would dry run them. And basically, I would call a lot of mid game back then. Like I really did. Where we'd run like defaults or something. We'd have a couple executes we did, and I would just call like a shit ton of mid game. And I still do a lot of that, to be honest. But I think I'm a lot better at it now, and I have a lot better understanding of how it works in Go compared to 1.6. I think I sent us into a lot of traps, or like in those days. I mean, not saying like everyone else was perfect. I think back then the game was very new and people were making mistakes left and right. But yeah, I mean, I think our practice back then was a little bit rough, like you said. Something that really bugged me was people would make plays like across the map. Corey, Jordan, not Spencer, obviously, because Spencer would kind of just sit back. But they would make a play and be like, oh, I just wanted to try something. But the thing is like you only get a limited number of CT gun rounds or T gun rounds a half. And when you're quote unquote trying something as one player 2 times a half, then like if everyone's trying something every round, no one's doing what they're supposed to do. You know, like you're never actually experiencing what you're supposed to experience. And that was a problem I had back then. And I think that's kind of what led to a lot of our early problems in the team, is that was a fundamental problem.
So, okay, actually to tack on to this topic here, okay, because what's funny is when you say something like that, like someone just trying a play somewhere, I can actually understand why even pros who are trying to be really, really good could fall into that trap. Because, for example, I always say the worst pro that anyone who's a beginner could watch is JW, because he almost will teach you how not to play like the standard meta of Counter-Strike. Like he'll just try something randomly. But you have to understand, in his team, they sort of like carve out a unique role for him where they're like, you can do this every now and then the rest of us will play a very static setup on this site, for example, you know, in case you die. So the point I'm making here is, I know that back then, even in the early days where the first majors were coming around, you used to watch a lot of the demos, you used to try and study a lot of the European teams. So one of the things I always found strange was, you guys were clearly the better team out of the North Americans at the European tournaments. You guys would make the playoffs, you obviously had these runs in the majors. Meanwhile, iBuyPower were like dominant when they were in North America. They were winning the LANs, they were the best team. So was there something that didn't cross over? Like, for example, did studying the Europeans, was there something drastically different about the meta of the NA teams that meant you couldn't like be the best NA team as well?
In those early days, it was in large part my fault that we played AWPers so bad. I didn't really understand how to deal with a lot of the things they did. But with that being said, they played some of the most vanilla Counter-Strike out of any teams around at the time. Like it was almost like I was playing a Steno team. Like they were running defaults across the map and just slowly getting picks. And their T sides were actually kind of terrible. It was their CT sides that were so dominant against us back then. Like I couldn't figure out how to bust into their sites. Like Ska was constantly moving around the maps. Like it was very hard for me to call when we played them, and I don't know what it was. I think I kind of lost confidence in how I was calling against them at some point, because I would call something on Dust 2 and basically like my team was scared of Scott. They were literally scared to run off Catwalk. I remember Jordan being like, no, I don't want to go Cat. Scott's going to wreck us at car. He gets 3 every time. And like, how do you call a strat when your teammates don't want to run off Catwalk on Dust 2? Like it's like the main source of hitting the A bomb site, which is like the bigger bomb site out of it. Like, how do you work with that? Like, so I basically got in this situation where I was like in my own head as well as my teammates were in their own head, and like we couldn't beat them. I don't know what it was. It was rough though. Like they had a better Inferno than we had, and that was a good map for us. They had a better Dust 2 than us, and that was a good map for us. Cash was kind of like 50-50. I don't even know if Cash was in the map pool when we first started playing them.
Probably
Can't
not.
remember.
I think it was like late 2014 that came.
Yes, later. But I mean, yeah, they had such strong CT sides. It's not like their T sides were anything special, but they would just demolish us on CT side.
So, okay, one of the things, like a topic that is kind of like underlying what you're saying here, though, is something that I've actually mentioned many times, because I always felt like people didn't understand this. Okay, so think about your latter days of Cloud9, and you got a lot of respect at this point in time for being in-game leader. Like a lot of people who saw the POV VODs from those ESLs were like, oh, he's doing a really good job reading the opponents here, he's calling the tactics. Obviously people like fREAKAZOiD obviously gave you a lot of props in public and said you did all your homework. So you built this rep as like the mastermind in-game leader. But one area I always like would emphasize, and people probably think I'm hating when I say this, but I mean, I actually just said it as an observation, is I always felt like you had a similar problem that I saw Lurpis have in his career, which is that Lurpis took the role of in-game leader as if it only was about tactics. So what he would actually do as an in-game leader is he would like prepare the tactics, he would call the tactic in the round, and if people didn't do the tactic, he would either just say like, you know, oh, well, we didn't do that right, guys, like this is still the right tactic, let's run it again, you know, or he'd run the tactics, they'd lose the game, and at the end he'd go, he wouldn't sort of blame them, but he would sort of think like, well, I did my job, you know, I mean, I can't make people do the rest of it. And so the point I'm making here is there's a component to being a leader as well, where, for example, I've always thought that Khan didn't have like the sickest tactics, but he seemed like he was a very good, like charismatic, you know, like a leader of men in that sense, you know, like he could somehow capture like the star player's attention and get him on board to do what he wants. That's obviously a difficult, like a quality to have or develop. Is this something that's been difficult in your career? Because it sounded like in those teams in Cloud9 Complexity, yeah, you were the leader, like the tactician, but were you like the locker room leader? Could you, like, if people don't want to do the tactic, can you discipline them? Can you get them on side? What do you think of this topic?
Yeah, I think that's a common misconception of me, is like people never respect me because I never like raised my voice to them, or I never like criticized someone when they fucked up, or Jordan was just able to do whatever the fuck he wanted, or Corey was able to do whatever the fuck he wanted. I admit I definitely had that problem when Corey was on the team. Like, I let Corey get away with whatever he wanted. I never really confronted him. People would be like messaging me like, Corey's doing it, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, you take it up with Corey. I don't have to deal with it. But when Corey left the team and like I read all those criticisms, I kind of like listened to tons of podcasts, because like I'm a huge podcast listener.
Okay.
About like leadership and stuff like that. And I brought in new aspects to my game as far as like being a leader goes. I developed like a lot of weird, quirky things from other sports. Like, I think in basketball, it's very common to get your star players like at the line if they're struggling, get them free shots, get them involved in the game, get them like into a flow. And I never thought about this for CS until Corey left. And then I started to try to get like Shroud involved more, like as far as like if he's struggling, or maybe even early in a match. And this actually has burned us. It burned us at a major. But if you look at our summer run, you'll see it. Early in a match against FNATIC, I specifically remember having the mindset where like we were going to need Shroud to like come up huge in this series. And I think we were playing FNATIC on Dust 2. We won Pistol. And I told Shroud to literally just like, I called some Strat on the fly. I was like, Shroud, just literally run up middle and fight people. While the guy boosted cat, while the guy pushing mid with you, holding lower, you're just going to frag out mid. And if they kill you, we'll guard your gun, because we're going to be on cat and pushing mid and stuff like that. But like, I had the mindset of like, I want to get my star players involved. I will do whatever it takes to get them involved. I'm dropping them guns and stuff like that, which isn't something that I had previously. It was more like, you're part of the team and this is what you're going to do. And if you don't like doing it, well, it's too fucking bad.
Sure, yeah.
So I think around then is when I changed a little bit as far as that goes. But as far as criticisms go, you can ask Jordan, and you can pretty much ask anyone. I've been in like yelling fights with Jordan. I mean, if people came into a Cloud9 practice when I was on the team with Jordan, they would literally think we hated each other. But it's just kind of how we talk to each other. It's very weird. We'll go back and forth where he'll have a disagreement with me, and then the next round will start and we'll both drop it, and I'll back to calling. Like, it's kind of like crazy the way that our conversations work and the tones that we use with each other. But I don't know. I'm a little bit socially awkward when it comes to like telling someone what's wrong. Like, I'll be very blunt. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. If you fuck up, I'm going to be like, and I do it with my current team. Like, I'm constantly like complaining with like people for over peaking, or they should have done this, they should have dropped smoke here, and they'll argue with me, and like the next round I'll just drop it and I'll be on a strat.
Okay.
So I think that's something that's evolved much more too since those Corey days, when SEMPHIS was on the team. But yeah, I think that's what I was kind of trying to allude to earlier, is just how much I've evolved in calling in those regards. Not so much like the tactics, but just how to deal with people.
Yeah, like man management,
Yeah, I'm a lot better at that now.
So, okay, one question I have in terms of SEMPHIS is, like I say, he was like a problematic teammate. It seems like everyone who's been his teammates pretty much said this in the past, at least. We don't know what he's like in TSM now. It might be different, But one of the things about him that's actually quite... I think this is something that hasn't translated very well, and unfortunately that whole Adderall thing has made it so that a lot of people don't like him. What people don't realise is the reason why people wanted to play with this guy is because he's actually like deceptively good at the game. Like, he looks like he's shit if you just see him in certain teams and certain matches, but actually he's one of those people where he just gets kills. I don't understand how entirely myself, but I know that he's someone else who like studied opponents and stuff. So what are the pros and cons of playing with SEMPHIS? Because on a lot of people don't know the pros, so I want to know those. But also in terms of the cons, you were saying here like you could never really confront him on this stuff. At one point in time, late 2014, when you had that run in Europe, I know you actually just let him become the in-game leader of the team. What was the thinking behind that? Like, and those two things. What are the pros and cons of SEMPHIS, and why did he just get to have control of the team at one point in time?
Yeah, so, I mean, honestly, Corey's an excellent CS player. Like, people don't understand how good he is. Like, Corey's skill is very high, I think. Like, his pistols are phenomenal. He's now, like, an AWPer on TSM, which I always thought was a little bit weird, because when I played with him, he was a very, like, stationary, almost like turret AWPer. He's not like your guardian, your simple. He's not gonna like run around the map and like slide peek somewhere and like get a pick and then run to. He's not that kind of player. Like he's very like stationary, but he's not gonna miss. That's the thing is like Corey's very accurate. Like he's a very accurate shooter. He was always like a burster when he rifled. So I think he's good in that aspect, and like he doesn't miss. He's a very consistent player. He brings a lot of knowledge to the team, which is why I liked him most on my teams. Is he always brought new strats? He's constantly watching pro level games, understanding the meta, what would work. He would bring new kind of creative ideas to the team too. Like as far as jumping through smokes or some weird stuff, he would find.
Wasn't he like one of the first to want to use Molotovs or something weird back when no one used them?
Yeah, he was. Ever since Goat came out, and this was back when like pros never used Molotovs. He always wanted to have 3 people with Molotovs, and like Molotoving off weird spots that other people weren't doing at the time. He's very ahead of the curve as far as that goes. Yeah.
So what about this period where he just got to be the in-game leader for a while? Because I always found that very weird. This is why I say back then it kind of aligned to me that you weren't really like the locker room leader type guy who like disciplines everyone. You were just the tactician, and so if the tactics aren't working, maybe the team's like, oh, we'll give it another. We'll try this instead. Like, what happened there in that period? Because obviously it was a bad period in terms of results. I'm
trying to think who was our 5th at that time.
That was when you still had Hiko. This was like this is like, remember that run in Europe where you went to Face It LAN, then you had ESWC, and then you had DreamHack Winter, and you just stayed in Europe for like a month.
But was Swag on the team?
No, because this is when you had Cloud9. So
so Shroud was on the team. Okay, so the reasoning behind this is, okay, I kind of assumed that that's what happened, but I couldn't remember if Shroud was on the team yet. When Swag left the team, and basically kind of wanted to do his own thing with iBuyPower, and we picked up Anger, I was more motivated than ever. And this is when I actually created new strats. This is something I hadn't really done ever in CSGO. I was finding new smokes, finding new Molotovs, finding new flashes. Had us doing like all this complex shit. Like I was kind of overloading the players with a bunch of strats, and people kept fucking up. Like Todd kept fucking up. Jordan kept fucking up. Like no one could do anything right. It was just every time we'd run a strat, there'd be like a massive opening where like we should be able to win this round, but someone misses their smoke, someone misses their flash, the timing's missed. It was really bad. Then we got rid of Todd, picked up Shroud, and it kind of continued for a little bit because Shroud was a little bit inexperienced. And I think it got to a point where I was just so down in the dumps as far as like how my team was performing on just not even like a mechanical level, just a cerebral level in the game. And I think my whole team saw that, just how I was acting. I was almost toxic as a leader. Like I got to be very bitter towards my team, and it got to the point where I even agreed I probably shouldn't in-game lead anymore because it's just depressing me too much. It was just I would come to practice mad, like, because I was putting all this effort in and we couldn't get anything right. We couldn't hit timings. It was almost like how I felt towards the end of Cloud9, honestly. It made me very upset. Like I would come to practice in a bad mood. And I agreed Corey should call. I would give in a lot of input. I always take over mid game. So like I don't necessarily think Corey probably is now, but I didn't at the time think he was very strong as far as mid game goes. And I wouldn't have been either if I didn't play under Steno. So like I don't blame him for that. But Steno taught me a lot of things about mid game and a lot of ways how to analyze it. So I would just take over and call stuff on the fly mid game. And even when Corey was calling, I would still put in a lot of work anti-stratting and finding out strats to call. Yeah, like I would call pistol rounds and stuff like that, like out of spawn. Like it was kind of like a 50-50 thing. But I did kind of allow Corey to take over in a lot of situations. Like, then I just would give no input, and I just focused on my own game. It was a very different form of the team, and eventually it got to the point where Corey's style was a little bit gimmicky, and teams started to kind of catch on, and I was okay with how the team was playing, so they wanted me to call again. Like, everyone wanted me to call again going into, I think it was a DreamHack major or something like that.
Yep,
so I took over again.
So when Hiko left the team at the end of that year, was where, if you look at the results, you can kind of like understand it. Like, the team had failed to make the playoffs of a bunch of tournaments. Then obviously you had the really bad ESEA, which is the one where you lost to Denial. And at the time, yeah, if everyone looks back now, they're going to have like today's glasses on and go, oh, fugly, ShahZam, oh no, these players. At the time, these weren't like top tier players. These weren't. That's not supposed to be a team that Cloud9 loses to, who's been to all these majors and international tournaments. So I can remember actually talking to Hiko at the time, when he was like thinking, like, should I leave? Should I not leave? And basically, I mean, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't mind me saying this, because I'm sure he said as much on stream. The reason mainly he left is because he looked at Cloud9 and he was like, what moves can we actually make in this team to become better, you know? And then when he looked, I mean, you kind of mentioned it already, like, obviously he wanted nothing to be removed. And then he felt like that couldn't happen, like people wouldn't do it, people were voting against him. And so at the time, his logic was like, you know, I'm one of the older players. I don't know how many more years I'm going to play CS for, so I should just go for broke now, try and be on a team that could win a major like next year, let's say. And so obviously at the time, he had a different plan than what ended up happening, because he wanted to join the iPad Power team, which is going to be like whatever, the NA super team. You remember all the hype that was around that. And they obviously got banned, so it never happened. At this period of time when this went on, what was it actually like from your perspective? Because in theory, okay, it's true, Hiko's like individual form had slumped a bit, but in theory, he was like supposed to be the best player in the team at the time, right?
Yeah, it was a very weird situation. I mean, I think Spencer had already decided before the major that he was going to leave the team, and I don't know like how that affected his mentality going into it and stuff like that, but we were kind of like a dead team walking going into that ESA LAN.
Wasn't it also implied that you were also considering maybe retiring or something, like becoming a coach or something?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think at the time I was considering it, and then the team really wanted me to play, so I stayed. But yeah, it kind of caught us off guard, honestly, when Spencer wanted to leave, because I mean, we knew it at that ESA LAN. We all knew that basically Spencer was going to want to leave after the LAN was over, but we didn't know he wanted to leave at the DreamHack major before that, because we were actually playing great. In the practices at that boot camp, we were dominating teams. We played well in that online tournament. I can't, Case King of the Hill or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was, but we played great in that tournament as well. We had some very good results. We did a lot of good work at that boot camp. We had such a good map pool, honestly, coming back home. And the way we I guess during that boot camp, before I go to ESA LAN, but during that boot camp, supposedly Spencer was already kind of doing some stuff behind the scenes as far as like wanting to leave the team, which when I found that out kind of disheartened me a little bit. I don't know, because I felt like we built such a good foundation. Spencer was such a pivotal like pillar to our team, you know. He's huge. How could you replace Spencer? At the time, he was probably like the best player in North America outside of Ska or Brax. So yeah, I mean, it was devastating when Spencer wanted to leave the team, and when he expressed himself at a dinner table or whatever. I mean, he did tell us, like he told us after ESA LAN, but I think the way CS players communicate, obviously we're not the best socially. And it hurt. Some of the things that he said at that table kind of hurt and didn't really sit well with the players. And eventually, like we're all good now, and shit like that. But it was rough on us for sure.
So here's the strange thing, is that I can't remember the exact timing, but I know that before he left the team, I actually did a reflections interview with him. And funny thing is, in the interview, I asked him something along the lines of like, you know, I always thought the old Quantic team they had, where it was like a half iBuyPower, half Cloud9 type players, was like one of the better teams that they had in NA. And so I essentially asked him the question, like, if you could make another team that was like, you know, Hiko, Dazed, whoever else, you know, and it was like the NA super team, but the notion is you don't have to like each other, you're just going to try and win, would you do it? And the funny thing is, at the time he said, like, well, no, I wouldn't. I think his answer was along the lines of like, well, no, I would never leave this team, you know, like I'm friends with these guys, like I'd rather be friends with someone than give up, you know. He actually kind of answered what was basically counter to what his current philosophy in life seems to be. So here's the question. It still seems to me from the outside like the key hinge point for whatever reason is nothing. Like somehow somehow that was like a sign to Hiko that if you were never going to cut nothing, then like somehow like the future could never get better. I don't know why he picked this as like the hinge moment, but what is the reason for that? Like, why? I've heard that a number of times in Complexity in Cloud9. At least it was brought up as a topic, right? Like, should we remove him? Especially when you're talking about like back in the days when sometimes he wasn't listening and he was alt tabbed out or whatever else he was doing at home. In these, was it never something you considered? Was it never something you would have done? Like, why was nothing like impossible to cut essentially?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know why it didn't back then. Honestly, I think it's Jordan was such a good friend, and I thought of him as such an insane talent. Like maybe I was like 1.6 fanboying because back then, yeah, I mean maybe he had his problems, but then he also had these games where he would just go crazy. He would just hit these nuts headshots all across the map, like the Virtus Pro Series that won ESL LAN.
Oh, yeah.
He had or the DreamHack, the first major where we played Very games, and Jordan just went off, you know, like when we upset Very games in group play. I mean, Jordan still wasn't a crazy, ridiculous player. He had so much potential, and I just saw all this potential in Jordan. He's such a good personality to have within the team. He kept good vibes going when he wasn't like causing Spencer or Corey to like go crazy and want to kill themselves. Like, but he's trying to be happy, you know, like he just would fuck up and upset them. It's not like he would like be toxic about it or anything like that. And yeah, Spencer on several occasions and even Corey came to me and they wanted to replace Jordan. And it ended up being these scenarios or these situations where we do team votes. And I can't remember who our fifth always was throughout the time, but it was like, obviously it was me, Jordan, Corey, Spencer, and maybe Brax or maybe Shroud. Like Shroud, yeah, anyone. But it would always be them two wanting to cut him, the other guy, Brax or Shroud or whoever, just very passive, just doesn't give a fuck, you know. Maybe it was anger, and then me. Obviously, I'm the swing vote, and they would always try to come to me, and they needed me because I think we needed 3 players from the last major to keep our top 8 spot to get into the next major. So they needed me. They needed me to want to kick Jordan out. And it was always me. It was always me that kept Jordan on the teams. And I'm not sure if he actually knows this. I think I've kind of brought it up to him a little bit towards the end of Cloud9. I'm sure he knew that Spencer wanted him cut. And just the way that Spencer talked to him a lot of times in game towards the end of when Spencer was on the team, it was like Spencer was definitely fed up. Yeah, Spencer 100% wanted Jordan gone, and yeah, it's probably my fault that Spencer ended up leaving the team.
Was it like when you look back? I mean, here's the thing, okay? The problem with thinking about past decisions is people just look at what happened afterwards and they judge it on that. So so obviously Cloud9 had an awesome run like 7 months after this. So it's easy to say, oh, we should have kept him in the team. At the time, if you'd have known it was like nothing or Hiko, if that had been the option presented, do you think you would have potentially removed nothing?
I don't know. I mean, they're both. I consider them both so talented. You know, like. At the time, Spencer was considered, like I said, top 3 talent in North America. I would consider Jordan like top 5 at the time. It's just he had a hard time showing it, but when he got put in these like hectic situations in matches where a lot of shit was going down and just pure chaotic craziness inside CSGO, he would end up getting 3 headshots, you know? And he has such a weird skill set for a superstar, which I always... As from coming from 1.6, I consider Jordan to be like a superstar. I know he might not have lived up to that in Go, but I think he's capable. Like in the E-League matches, he showed he's capable of being the superstar on the team and playing lights out. I don't know why he can't bring that consistency to the game or what.
Because let's address this topic then, because, okay, I'll give people like the backstory. So I've literally watched Nothing's career ever since he got vaguely to a pro level. So I'm talking like I got referred to earlier, like just after CGS. We're talking, in fact, actually, the interesting thing was his rise as an individual player was during CGS, because when all the 1.6 players left, it was people like him, it was the guys who were like actually the old evil geniuses, which was Steno and those other guys. These are all the players at Evolution. These are all the people who like sort of took that top tier up for a while. And the thing about Nothing was he was like the promised one. He was supposed to be like the chosen one of NA who was going to become the next like superstar, K-Sharp, Shagwa, Method, whatever player, you know, who was going to be the next NA star. And he was going to be so good. And in practice and in online games, he absolutely, like, he had that, like, He did all the first steps correct, okay? Like, he was going to be the new Sidney Crosby, the LeBron James, the guy who comes into the league and he's supposed to be the best immediately, you know. He had all that there. And in his first lands, yeah, he had some very good games as well. But ever since the era, because you have to realize, for the last sort of like, I think it was like a year and a half in 1.6, he had Tommy as his leader, Lurpis. And I remember I talked to Lurpis a lot at the time because we were obviously friends about how the team was going and the problems. And I know he himself pretty much tore his hair out trying to deal with nothing, because the problem was, he told me, like, think about this, Sean. So do you remember the Finnish player called Ruit, who used to play on Lurpis's teams?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, this guy, skill-wise, is one of the best players of all time, right? Like, absolutely incredible players, taking over whole lands himself. In terms of all-time great players, he's a much greater player than nothing, right? Accomplished more, played against top European teams a lot longer, you know. Here's the funny thing. If you ask Lurpis who the best player he ever played with, just on, like, any level, don't count just pro games, and he says it's nothing, because he says in practice, Jordan would do, like, stuff in, like, scrims that was, like, melt your brain. Like, if this guy can do this, then we don't have to worry next week when we go against, like, Forrest and Neo. Like, we might be able to win, you know. The problem was, what tore his hair out is, how do you get this guy to do that stuff in the actual fucking game, you know? Like, when we go to the LAN, sometimes he's just a normal player, you know. Is it, where's the guy I was playing with in practice? And so, when you add in, unfortunately, some of the side things I've mentioned already, like, maybe he wasn't always listening, or he was distracted, a bit of a scatterbrain, it makes it frustrating, you know, if you're the in-game leader, because you do know that's like, maybe if I could tap into this somehow, but it's how do you do it? And I mean, Lopez never figured out how. I don't know if anyone ever did, but what were your issues in that sense? Because like you're saying, obviously the talent is there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably had the same problems with Jordan, and I'm not saying he never showed up in matches. Like, Jordan still had some of the best performances on the team when he was around, but yeah, with the stuff I saw in practice, that was ridiculous, and that's why I could never get rid of him. I knew that this guy could be the best in North America. The way he talked, the way he kind of moved around the map, the way he peeked things, the way his confidence in the way he plays is ridiculous. Like, it's perfect in practice, and it's even very good in matches. I'm not saying he's bad in matches. That's the thing. Like, he would just make these, like, small mental errors. Like, he would forget how to throw a smoke, or he would forget how to do this. So, like, he would over peek there. Like, weird stuff would happen. And I'm not sure if that was because of the environment of the match, or maybe that did happen in scrims. It's just the people in scrims just weren't trying as hard or something like that on the other team. But yeah, I always thought Jordan could be the best player in North America. And something that's really cool about Jordan that I always admired as far as him as a player is his ability to explain things, and kind of, I don't know, I just feel like people in the game have played so much that they can't explain the things that they do, or the reasonings behind it, or what happens when the smoke goes down. Jordan's actually a very cerebral person. When he sees something, or if you want him to even explain how he sprays the spray pattern, he'll go so in depth, and it's very unusual for someone to be able to do that in CS:GO, because it's so second nature to them. They don't even think. It's subconscious. They're controlling their spray. This I just pulled down my mouse. I move it this way. Blah, blah, blah. Like, Jordan can guide you through every bullet of controlling a spray. Like, he's thought everything he does through, and if something kills him, he'll think it through. He's not some bonehead stoner that everyone thinks he is. He's actually very smart. He's smart in very weird ways, actually. He's unlike anyone I've ever met, and I think it kind of threw me off when I first met him and started talking with him and got to know him. And I don't know, maybe he just gets too much in his own head when he's playing, and I think that is it. And towards the end or middle of Cloud9, I think maybe he tried to start doing, like, yoga and stuff to calm him, because yeah, his brain's like it's running like 1,000 miles an hour when he's playing a match. And sometimes he'll just talk just to talk, and it would drive me crazy. He would just have, like, pointless conversations in the middle of a match, because he just has to be doing something almost, or moving. Okay. And yeah, I think that's always what held him back.
So, okay, if you're the in-game leader, though, and you're trying to, like, position... I mean, you're talking now about the things you've been, like, after Cloud9, etc., learned about well, after the Hiko era, at least, learned about man management and how to get like a star going. You know, these all sound like really useful things. What were the difficulties with nothing in that sense? Because I know, again, reaching back to the Evil Geniuses era, a problem that when I talked to SEMPHIS in Cloud9 and CSGO, it sounds like a similar problem existed with nothing, which was, for whatever reason, he would go through phases where he'd just decide he's like a different type of player than he was like 3 months before. So the in-game leader might want him to be an entry fragger at this point in time, but now he's like, no, I'm the clutch player now. Like I have to be like the lurker, and then another round. You know, it's like it felt like he kept jumping around even what he wanted to do in the game. But you know, if you're the in-game leader, you want as many like fixed parts as you can. You don't want a lot of moving pieces, right?
Yeah, that definitely drove me crazy, and I think it was around that time. I think when Jordan just kept wanting to change roles and stuff, that I almost went on board the whole Jordan needs to be cut train with Spencer and Corey. Because yeah, he did. He went through roles where he wanted to be a support player, he wanted to be an entry frag, he wanted to be a lurker, he wanted to do this, that. He wanted to do everything. And how do you design your team around someone that literally wants to do all the roles? Like you can't. Like you literally have to let that person do whatever they want. But the problem is I was already letting Spencer do whatever he wanted. Spencer literally would just go across on the other side of the map, or even on the same side of the map, and do whatever he wanted. It was like I was calling 4-man strats back then, and I couldn't call 3-man strats with Jordan and Spencer doing whatever the hell they wanted. Like I was in a really weird situation because, yeah, Jordan got in scenarios where he wouldn't want to entry frag anymore. And he was our entry fragger back then. So Corey would be supporting him, but running out first in horrible timings where the flashes would no longer be effective. I don't know. It was a nightmare back then. I'm not going to lie.
So in the era when Hiko left, and obviously the first player you replaced him with was ShahZam, and this was actually when you got in... yeah, that's right. It was ShahZam you had. So this was the era that unfortunately is like the dark days of Cloud9, because you had an even worse ESEA land than when we came last place. You lost to Neelam, and then you had the ESL clone, which I mean SEMPHIS has now put a different asterisk next to that one as to why I remember that. It was actually Katowice. It was the ESL on Katowice. So okay, this is not a good period of time, and unfortunately, if you remember, a lot of the blame went on ShahZam at the time. Because let's face it, he did have some pretty bad games. I mean, those games at the major, it wasn't even like just missing shots. Like, yeah, he'd miss shots, but he would also like miss a shot where it's like maybe you shouldn't have taken that shot because he needed to stay alive for 5 seconds more. You know, like things where it's like more fundamental, the errors he made. What was ShahZam's problems? Because here's what I never understood. In Denial, when he beat you guys, he looked super sick. He was going off completely. Then he comes to your team. He never really looked that good. He was getting the AWP all the time, but it wasn't like he was some super duper AWPer in Cloud9. And then after Cloud9, he had a lot of success again. He went back to being, admittedly, his teams weren't super great, but he was always the best player on them. He would have good Sevo lands, etc. What was his problem in Cloud9? What was the difficulty of using him that first time around? Because obviously he's your teammate again now.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, well, the weird thing about Shaz is when he was on Cloud9, he was actually our best fragger. Like he actually did have the best stats on the team. He was playing lights out, especially when he first joined. When he first joined, he was ridiculously good. And I think he struggled a lot as far as what I did when he joined, as well as I think I did this for a couple other people. I can't remember who I did this for. But we had a couple of roster changes throughout the time on Cloud9. And when he joined, I was like, what do you want to do? What do you like doing? You tell me everything you like doing on every map, and I promise you, I will find ways to get you kills in whatever spot you want. I will get you pop flashes to get you kills. Like, I will do whatever. Like, tell me how you like getting picks, basically. I did this for Ska. Okay. And at first he did, but he got kind of quiet and shy. I think he didn't like... he probably never had someone criticizing him so much as he did when he joined the team.
Okay.
And... basically, when he would overpeak or when he died, I'd be like, Shaz, don't overpeak and die. And we ended up having to get rid of ShahZam, not because of him missing or him being a bad player. It's just in like 3v3s and weird 2v2s, 4v3s in our favor, he would overpeak a little bit in those scenarios. I don't think he was a little bit raw in late game scenarios and overextend and die. He'd miss a shot and die, basically. But I think it's his nerves. Honestly, it was probably nerves back then. He's a lot more experienced now than he was back then, so he doesn't really make those mistakes. And yeah, I think that's probably like that match against TSM. I think at Katowice, and I can't even remember the other team we lost to be honest. But we should have probably beat TSM. It was a situation where we had them like against the wall, and they ecoed us to get out.
I think it was Virtus Pro, wasn't it? Wasn't that the other team you played?
Maybe we lost that one pretty bad. I don't remember actually what happened in the other game.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I think Shaz had a lot of over peaks in that overpass game. Basically, that cost us, and that's why Days made that video or whatever. I don't think he like missed tons of shots, or he probably doesn't look like he did a lot of shitty stuff to a Silver, but he over peaked a lot, and he was a little bit raw, and I think too raw for the time, which is why we decided to pick up Ska or whatever. But obviously, pick up Ska at the time was everyone's like golden child. Like every org wanted Ska, so it wasn't just like we were getting rid of Shaz because we had no backup plan kind of thing. It was a play for Ska.
Okay, so I've got a question about that, which is that's actually one of the areas that I feel like, this will sound weird, but I feel like that's what's a little bit dirty about how a lot of the people, because like you've probably noticed this over the last sort of, before Team Liquid had its good run of like getting some decent results, especially this year, obviously they've gotten up in people's estimations a lot. Before that, a lot of people actually were very critical of Hiko. And one of the reasons why is a lot of people, maybe Cloud9 fans, I don't know, sort of hated on him like, oh, you left Cloud9 and you thought you were going to do this, this and this, and then you know your teams weren't that good. Meanwhile, look what Cloud9 accomplished. But the reason why I always thought that was a little bit unfair is you have to remember, first of all, the main team he was going to make just collapsed overnight because they all got banned. And then after that, it was going to be him and Skadoodle were going to make a super team. But obviously, Skadoodle left. Skadoodle went and joined your team. And at that point in time, joining Cloud9 was not an option for Hiko for obvious reasons, like politically, personality-wise. And so he was left on his own, and he had to kind of take a while before he found Team Liquid. How did you get Skadoodle to join Cloud9? Because I remember at the time, it really did sound like they were a package deal. And the one offer they weren't considering was Cloud9. They were thinking of like, maybe we join CLG together, maybe we join Team Liquid, maybe... I mean, I remember at the time there was one where like CLG... TL's best players were going to leave TL and make an org with them. It's like at the time it seemed like the one option that won't happen is Skadoodle on his own join Cloud9, but suddenly out of nowhere he does. What happened?
Yeah, dude, I honestly don't really know why we ended up getting Ska. I think he just, looking back, I mean, we didn't really have results to make him want to join the team, right? I mean, we're still probably pretty dominant in the North American region. He saw all of his ex-teammates got banned. He probably considered us second to them. He knew Cloud9 was like a pretty good organization.
So it wasn't any kind of like amazing speech from you. You didn't tell.
I mean, yeah, no,
I give you X, Y, and Z.
No, so it's funny actually. When we ended up recruiting Ska and FREAKAZOiD, I never signed off on the FREAKAZOiD pickup. I didn't actually know it was happening. Okay. Jordan picked him up. Jordan and Trace actually picked him up basically while I was in Vegas for a weekend or something like that. It was right after ESA LAN. I was like, dude, I gotta fucking chill, man. Like this is ridiculous. Like we have downtime. Like I'm gonna go to Vegas for the weekend. I'm gonna like have a good time. We'll talk about the 5th when I get back. And that was the whole problem with when Corey left the team and he kind of thought no one told him. Like I just literally fell off the grid for like 2 days, 3 days. And during those 2 or 3 days, I guess Corey kind of found out that he was probably gonna get cut, but I didn't even know if we were going to cut Corey at the time. Like, we didn't know if we were looking for 1 or 2 players kind of thing. And I sent Ska a DM, like a long message. It's like, hey, man, we really want you to join. Like, I know I could do a great job with you. I could put you in really good situations. I played with Dazed, and I know a lot of the things he does to get you kills. And I know you just want to win. And if you want to win, this is the place for you to be. And I told him that. I was like, if you want to bring Spencer, maybe we could try to figure something out. But I knew that's probably a long shot as far as like Spencer's kind of beliefs as far as like the org goes and stuff like that. Like it wasn't like Spencer didn't want to play with us. Like I could tell you Spencer did want to play with us. I might have even been able to get Spencer to come back to the team if certain things could have happened on the org's end, but that would have probably never happened.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, okay. Here's a topic about Skadoodle I have a question for. So when you described playing against iBuyPower, it makes sense the way you describe it. Like, Skadoodle was like the star player. For me, I always thought he was the best player. Like, when he went off is when they were looked unbeatable, you know? And it's true. At the time, it did seem like, considering the rest of the team was so default, it felt like Dazed always did a really good job of kind of like using Skadoodle like a chess piece, you know, like move him to here this time, or have someone back him up so he can push this one spot here, and then another round you just swap him around to be a static defender on a different site, you know. He did a pretty good job of moving that around. So as a result, if you're attacking against that, I've always said that's one of the most underrated aspects of CT play, is if you have a really dominant AWPer and you move him around, because how the fuck's the enemy in-game leader supposed to know that, you know? He attacks the other site now, and the guy's on the corner there, that's going to throw his whole plan off. At the first LAN you had with Skadoodle was the Gfinity where you finished last place. And then after that, a few weeks later, was when you had this sick little run in the summer. Was there any like growing pains to trying to put Skadoodle into the team? Was it as simple as you thought it was going to be? Did you have to figure something different out? Because, I mean, a lot of the criticism I noticed before you had the good run and after is always like, like, do you have to tell Skadoodle to move around? Will he just like stay in one spot if you don't? I'm sure you've heard these criticisms before. So, what is it like to actually use Skadoodle as a player in one of your teams?
Yeah, so like I said with the whole ShahZam thing, when he joined, I was like, "What do you want to do? Like, what do you like doing?" And we had like long conversations about the things that he likes doing. But he's so quiet. He was very in his shell back then. He's a lot more open now, actually. But back then, it was like, dude, this is going to be hard, actually, because I'm going to actually have to go back and find out how Daze used him and what he liked doing. Or maybe this guy is just so good, he's good at everything. Like, I had no idea. Like, and he is. He's so good, he's good at everything. Like, you could literally put Ska, like, front hut on nuke with an AWP, and he'll probably get, like, 3 kills. You know, like, he could take a shot and, like, slide around and, like, move around. His movement is ridiculous. Like, he's such, like, a slimy AWPer. Like, I've never seen anything like it, actually. It's very weird to watch on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, it was difficult at first. He didn't really know what he wanted to do or the spots. I guess he knew the spots he wanted to play, but just like how he wanted support in those spots. And I think after Gfinity, we came back home or something like that, and we practiced our asses off. It was like, that was the time when we had like 60 or something online matches, and we went something ridiculous like 50 and 55 and 5 online or something like that. And it's not like these teams in North America weren't trying to scrim the fuck out of us and beat us just for the sake of beating us. So like the fact that we were able to do that in that time frame was crazy, because this is when Ryan just came back to CS, and I think it really helped Ska's confidence and motivation to play the game back then. And we built like a really strong foundation in those weeks before that summer run. And those few weeks right there, as well as those weeks, definitely built the foundation. And then when we went on that summer run, we were traveling so much that when we were in the hotels, we were able to correct the things that we were fucking up on, without having to worry about people being like, "Oh, let's scrim." We didn't have to worry about that because we were constantly traveling. So it was like the perfect storm of what could have happened, I think. Just how the practice went down. Because we had just enough as far as like in-game preparation, combined with the fact that we were getting excellent out-of-game preparation, like where people would huddle around me and I would watch a demo, and we would incorporate certain aspects of other pro teams into our play, as well as like I would jot down like verbal notes into everyone's head, like, "Hey, look at this team. They're doing a stack here, and this is why I'm gonna call X, Y, and Z when we play them, and this is why it's gonna work." And yeah, so that it helped out a lot, just the schedule.
When you were saying here, like with Skadoodle and ShahZam, actually you tried this approach kind of like, okay, you told me what you want and I'll see if I can like accommodate you. When you're saying about like learning some of the things about being a leader and all the rest of it, is it the case that, obviously I'm sure there are some players who respond to that. Are there some players, like maybe some of these players, who, do you think it's better actually if you had said, here's what I'm going to do with you instead. Like, I'll look at your game and kind of figure out what I think you'll be best at, and maybe that they might even take comfort in that. The idea that like, oh, maybe he knows better than me, and this will work. Do some players need that? Do they need like a kind of like a guiding hand?
Yeah, I think Scott needs that. That was something that I definitely didn't know, like I guess at that very time. But Scott definitely needed that, and I think towards the end of Cloud9, and maybe in like certain situations, it got to a point where, I mean, like towards the end of the summer run or whatever, he was like playing the same spots over and over, and he's not really the type of person that's like, I don't want to go here anymore. I mean, they know I'm here. Like, they know I'm just gonna get flashed out. There's gonna be no kills. He'll literally just like sit there, like, and just he'll try to like counter like the 25 flashbangs coming over instead of like just going to the other bomb site where they don't know he is. You know, like, yeah, I learned that pretty quickly that we have to move him around, and I wish I would have thrown him in scenarios more that were just like ridiculous, like just to see how he fared, like just JW stuff, you know, like opping and ladder him on train or something like that, because he's so capable of it. Like the way when I watch him play, he's literally capable of anything when he's opping. He's very quick as far as aim goes. He's very quick as far as movement goes. He's really good all-around player. I think lately he's slumped a little bit, which is why everyone's been so critical of him as far as like his. But I don't know if it's even slumping or if it's him being in new scenarios combined with the fact that, I mean, he's just a little bit uncomfortable, or maybe people know how he plays. I don't know, so he doesn't feel confident. Because yeah, he did lack a lot of confidence in certain aspects of our run. It's shocking. Like during that run, right, when everyone thought Ska was a top 3 opera in the world, he would come back and be like, "I suck. I'm terrible." Like he thought he was terrible, and we were like, "Dude, are you kidding me? You're literally carrying us on your back right now. You're not terrible." It's funny though, because he actually thought he was terrible during the summer, and a lot of people don't realize that.
I mean, this is one thing that I always found. Like, let's think of that specific team, and obviously, like I say, 3 top 2 places at big international lands. What I find so weird about it is the star duo of the team, Shroud and Skadoodle, I think have to be the most weird North American stars I've ever seen. Because normally, I mean, think of the history of North American Counter-Strike. The problem North America usually has is that players who aren't star level think that they're fucking as good as Olaf Meister, and they're like, "Oh, dude, when I play versus him, like, I wrecked him in his scrim, and, you know, like, oh, I'm going to be so good." Like, they're all like the joke of what people think A2Z is like, you know, like, oh, I'm just going to body everyone at the LAN, and then they go there, and obviously they're not as good as that player. They don't do that, and you think, oh, stupid. Like, as an outsider, you think, oh, bloody Americans, like, they all think they're the best, you know. So what I don't get is, when I hear these stories about Shroud and Skadoodle, and I've even seen them in interviews, it feels like they're the ones who don't know that they have, like, the superstar talent. Like, Shroud's one of the ones that's confused me for the longest, because I've watched so many games of his online and on stream, etc., and I'm like, if I was this guy, I would be incredibly confident. I'd be like, okay, maybe something didn't work in that last match, but I know I can beat all these players I'm playing. But it feels like somehow, like, what do you think it is? They lack the confidence? They don't conceive of themselves as a star player? What is it with these 2 guys? I mean, they're obviously fantastically talented.
Dude, I have no idea. But Shroud's kind of come into his own now lately. But that's kind of why I started at the whole summer run thing, just sending Shroud like up middle to get kills, you know? Like, yeah, it's so weird, because I'd play with Shroud and you'd be like, "Nah, Ryan's a much better player than me. Like, FREAKAZOid's way better." And I'd be like, Jesus Christ, man. Our star players think they suck. Like, what the fuck is going on right now? Like it makes no sense, right? Like, Shroud is literally like the best aimer in North America, like hands down, I feel like, when he's rifling. Like, you could watch this guy on stream pull off the most ridiculous 4Ks and 5Ks. Just like one-shot pistol like 4 people that are jumping around the map looking for him, you know? It's crazy. I don't get it. Because, yeah, when I remember back in like the early days when everyone was young and like sick in 1.6 or whatever, when you were good at back then, you would know you're good, and you would basically talk shit. Like you're pretty vocal about it, right? Like, and even the good Euros, right? They have this swagger to them. They have like an ego swagger to them. Like a lot of fans don't know that, but like the top Europeans, like, and they definitely have like an ego, you know. They should. They're the best in their game, and
I mean, put it this way, I'll give you an example.
It's different. It was different.
So because the Astralis teams bombed all those major semis and all those famously haven't won a lot of tournaments and maybe could have. Okay, it's true. In that scenario, if you look at Device's face, he looks like, everything's going to shit. He's really worried. Yeah, that's against the best teams in the world. Yeah. You put that guy in a group stage against like some 11th best team, and he would be like, I'm going to destroy these guys. Like, these guys can't handle me, you know?
No, yeah. A perfect example of that is when we played Astralis in the finals of, what was that, the DreamHack Valencia. Yeah. Dude, they showed us no respect. They literally pushed the entire time. But if you put them against FNATIC, like that would never happen, you know, like at that same tournament. But yeah, I think it might have been like a weird confidence issue, and I think that has maybe been dealt with in some way or another, because now when I watch Shroud, he plays with so much more confidence. And when I watch Ska play, he plays in a lot more versatile spots where he's like moving around and kind of getting more picks and stuff like that. I'm not saying he's still no Fallen, where Fallen will like, I did like actually a video that I might release soon where Fallen's lurking around on train, and he's like a lurk entry up. It's so weird. He'll just walk out middle using like cues around the map and sounds being made and get a pick and then fall back in. I'm not sure Ska is capable of doing something like that, but maybe one day. Yeah, I mean, maybe like with some work or confidence, stuff like that. It's like Ska doesn't know rotations. He does. It's just, I don't know.
Okay, one more question I have about Skadoodle is one of the reasons why I can understand the difficulties of bringing ShahZam in initially is one of the things famously that your teams never had was the dedicated AWPer. You used to do it. You used to be in like the MSL spot where you're like, well, no one else in the team AWPs. Like, I guess I'll do it on the maps where you need an AWP, or I'll do it on a spot, you know, where it's useful to have an AWP to get information or something. Was it difficult moving to using, for example, like if Skadoodle's super talented, but if you've never had an AWPer, having like a guy who has an AWP every round, it's a different way of thinking of the game, right?
Yeah, it definitely is. I actually always try to pass off AWPing onto Swag when he was on the team, but it was just like he wasn't really down. Which is funny because I think now if I played with Swag, he'd be down. He'd be down to like AWP a lot. But back then he didn't really want to. Yeah, it opened up a lot of things as far as just how I was able to call mid game, because when you're like a rifle in the pack of where you want to go and like you're visually seeing how people are playing areas right up front, you can make quick calls, right? And I think that's why I think I read a lot of conversation recently about coaches out of game not having that feel. Having that feel as like the first or second guy in and being the in-game leader, you can make instinctive calls based on what you hear, and not even what you hear, what you don't hear, like anything that happens around you, you just get like subconscious feelings as far as the other team's setup, just based on the amount of hours you've watched and played. So it helped a lot as far as our T sides go, and just how fluid we were across the map, for sure.
So when you guys brought in FREAKAZOiD, like you said, I mean, aside from nothing, I don't think anyone else saw this move coming. I mean, it feels like he just like pulled that guy out of the past somewhere, where it's like, what the fuck was this guy doing it? And somehow he was on the team. But the crazy thing was, it obviously worked. And so one of the things I actually thought was really good is, I remember when I saw those first few tournaments and I saw the style he was using, I was like, even if this guy has no kills on the scoreboard, this is like the wet dream if you're a strat-based in-game leader, to have a guy who literally will just entry the spot you say when you say, even if he knows he just died 10 times, right? Isn't that the dream?
Yeah, no, it was the dream. Yeah, like he would get so upset. Like, man, that early summer run, dude, it was such an emotional time for our team, because I had like our star players thinking they sucked, and then even though they were carrying us, and then I had Ryan being like really depressed as far as his stat lines go. He didn't think he was doing all that well, and thought he should have been doing better. And maybe, but he just came back from maybe like a year-long hiatus, and then Jordan was just being Jordan, trying to cheer everyone up, you know. But yeah, Ryan shocked me as far as just his willingness to just throw his life away in a given round just for the sake of the team winning. I think in the beginning it was very rough, because I mean, there's one thing to just kind of rush in and die for the team, and there's another thing to like. I mean, there's ways to do it properly, right? Like, I don't think necessarily you should just run in and just with your back turned kind of thing and just, hey, here I am, kill me while my other teammates kill you in the side. You should still jiggle peek and try to, you know, bait a shot out or something like that. And that's what Ryan's added to his game. Ryan's actually very smart in the game now these days. He's one of the smarter players on the team I'm playing on right now, Echo Fox. And yeah, I think he was probably one of the smarter players on Cloud9 at the end as far as how he played. And I'm not sure when exactly he learned all this. Maybe he put a lot of time in when I left the team. But yeah, it shows. Like he's played a lot of Counter-Strike since joining Cloud9. He has been so driven to get better and be one of the better players in the world. And it showed throughout our time on Cloud9. He started off towards the bottom of the scoreboard. I think by the end of the year, he was like, I mean, he's towards the middle, I think. Like he's playing pretty well towards the end of Cloud9.
So if we look at that summer period and we consider this is like the best run of your career in CSGO, it kind of makes sense when you consider all these pieces together. So you've got like an entry fragger who will literally just entry wherever you say. You've got the superstar AWPer. Shroud's obviously a very good player. If you're an in-game leader, especially one who does like want to run strats and call things on the fly, etc., this has to be like a great setup for you. Do you think like at that point in time, what was your style like? What was effective about it? I mean, fREAKAZoid said a bunch of stuff like that you would watch every demo, and even if the other people in the team didn't watch it, you kind of like you did the homework for them almost. Like how did it actually work in the game then?
Yeah, so I mean, we just put in tons of work as far as like us playing and practicing a lot. I would, yeah, like Ryan said, I would watch tons and tons of demos. I'd bring in new strats that I thought would fit our style. I thought back then we had a pretty explosive style, and I'm not gonna say we were scrimming people or anything like that. I tried to create and get strats that used minimal amount of grenades, and the way I would kind of explain that using an example would be like our veggie wrap strat on Cash. I mean, it's not super complex, right? It's 3 people gather me and one guy goes door, and I'm just like lurking somewhere, and if there's a smoke and there's 2 smokes and 2 flashes thrown, right? And we basically just use the aim of Shroud and fREAKAZoid and Jordan and Scott to like just blow up a site. Yeah, we did a lot of stuff like that and a lot of fast-paced stuff. I think we drew a lot of comparisons back then to how EnVyUs was playing. That's kind of the style I was trying to mimic. Not so much like a slow default team, but we did have that aspect to our game where that's actually the first things that we went over when we came back from Gfinity was slow defaults and just being able to work off each other, allowing me to just not dying and allowing me to call off the rotations on the map and understanding who should be making plays and who shouldn't be making plays. So we had that foundation to fall back on, but when we added that explosive style where I was just throwing in like quick strats, that's when we really succeeded. And just we kept on adding a new strat in here and there that would catch teams off. Yeah, that's what helped a lot, I think.
So you referenced there, like it was similar to the EnVyUs style, which is obviously kind of interesting because the team that actually this run began against and 2 of your big best of 3 wins were against EnVyUs. There was the ESL one in the group stage and then obviously the semi-final at ESWC. Now, this team at the time, it's very easy for people to use the logic of like, well, since they lost to you, they must have been slumping and they were bad. It's like, well, okay, to a degree, but at the same point in time, they weren't getting beaten by many teams before that. You had to be a pretty fucking good team to beat them. So what did you have figured out about EnVyUs? Because it's true, they didn't necessarily have this super deep playbook. In fact, Happy's even said he's not really someone who watches demos, you know? I feel like he's someone who's more concentrates just on his own style and just tries to like set up matchups for his star players, if you know what I mean. So what was the secret to countering EnVyUs, as it were?
Yeah, I think the secret to beating EnVyUs was just their lack of creativity on their CT sides. I did do a very good job of reading like what they would do on their T sides too, but their CT sides are very cut and dry. And even when they won that major in Cluj, I was just like, holy shit, man, these guys, how did they do this? Like it blew my mind because here I am having all these fucking crazy ass Twitter people and people on the forums telling me that I have to move Ska around more and all this shit. I literally watched EnVyUs play a whole tournament where Kenny S would just like op the wrap on Inferno every fucking round. Like this guy literally was like glued to his spot, just not moving anywhere throughout this whole entire tournament. It drove me crazy that here all these fucking Reddit theorists and all this shit are out there saying Ska's not moving around enough. And meanwhile, I'm moving Ska around probably too much if you look at the successful teams. And you have EnVyUs just sticking Kenny S at wrap, sticking him at like A on Dusty. Like he's literally in the same spot every round. They have no creativity at all in their set, or B on cash. He literally was a B cash player the entire tournament. And I mean, yeah, they were so sick that tournament. They just literally just shut down their spots. I don't know, and then they just retook sites when they needed to.
But they were predictable when you were on T side. Like you
yeah,
knew he's going to be in this spot every time.
Mean, I feel like I don't know, it was the same thing as when we played against them, though. You know, like the same thing. You know, like I don't know why the other teams couldn't devise like a good or like create a good read against those setups. You know, like they were in them almost every round. You know, like. And that's why we were better
in like a live game when you're on T side. Are you better at reading opponents than a lot of other in-game leaders?
I mean, if a team was blindly doing something like that to me, probably not. Like me and any other leader would probably be in the same spot. But if it's a tournament and you even have like 2 hours to prepare, or even like fucking like a day to prepare, you know, like I'm sitting there watching VODs on my phone, like if like just like glancing through like gun rounds and stuff like that, you know, like all it takes is literally watching one match to know, hey, if no nades are thrown, they're doing a head stack in the A bomb site and Kenny S is opping B. Like you literally could figure it out just by the grenades that are thrown in the first 10 seconds of a round, like what their setup was at that tournament, if you did any research, which is why it was so crazy to me. It's not like it involves some kind of heavy anti-shroud or anything like that. And I know like a lot of these teams have analysts too. Like we got one literally the last tournament that I was on Cloud9. And some of the work that these fucking analysts put in, man, is just unreal. Like they will literally break down every single round. And now I think all the teams have them. Back then I think FNATIC had like 2 or 3. It was like Astralis has like 2. They go behind the scenes and no one really knows about them. They're super valuable, and I think. I don't know. It's weird that stuff wasn't countered at that tournament because, yeah, it seems like it's always been pretty easy for me to counter when we play them.
So, I mean, you touched on it there. Like at that point in time, at least, like part of your ability to read them and to know what's happening is essentially you've studied and so you have an idea of what they might run, and you're kind of identifying what it is, right? You're not just going in the game, don't know who these are, and then just seeing one guy at this spot and knowing what they do, right? You're not psychic, but that way. It's more preparation, right?
Yeah, it's literally all preparation. Like it's what you've seen like 20 times before that in the demos that makes you assume that people are going to be in those spots, or it's like just taking educated guesses. You know, there's only so many spots people can play on the map, and if they're not throwing certain grenades and not doing certain things, not making certain noises, you can kind of insinuate that they're going to be in those spots. Like it's not rocket science, you know.
Because when a lot of us watched the 3 tournament run, and you had the ESL Pro League where you almost beat FNATIC in a best of 5, then ESWC, like it was close in terms of like the rounds were close on the last map, but okay, Na'Vi like kind of crushed you on one of the maps, and then the last one was the TSM one, which like you said, I mean famously that's not the sort of team that TSM chokes against. They will just play with no respect. The difference between those 3 tournaments is ESL Pro League had a day between the semis and the final. The other 2, the semis and the final, were on the same day. Was that a key reason as to why you were close to beating FNATIC, do you think? Did you get anything extra out of that half a day or whatever you had to prep for them?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think if we had an extra day to prepare for Astralis in that tournament, we probably could have beat them. We were so hot that tournament. I think if you look at any of the tournaments, that's the one I'm most impressed with, because I think in group stages we beat Kingwin, which is like now G2. We beat Na'Vi, and then in the bracket play we beat FNATIC. Like, I mean, during the time, those teams were pretty fucking good. And then we lost in the finals. You know, like I don't even know if we dropped the map until the finals. Like
probably not. I think.
it was a pretty decent tournament for us for sure. I think if we had another day, because our confidence was so high, we just like what we did to Fnatic on Mirage, man. Like, goddamn, like that was probably, if you look at any of the maps on like that tournament run, that was just pure anti-strats by me. Like, it was ridiculous. That would never be able to happen again. And like that, I don't know. My teammates convinced me that we were sick on Mirage, and we left it in against Astralis, and they quickly reminded us that we were not sick on Mirage.
I mean, they were very good on it at the time.
Yeah, they were really
okay. This Fnatic game you're talking about there, the one where you reckon them on Mirage, in this game, people might not know this, but aside from the ESL Pro League finals where Fnatic beat you, obviously Pronax has been someone who's tortured you over your career, because he was the guy we're in that first major in the semi. You came in with all your anti-strats prepared. I always imagine you like the news anchor with his papers, like, okay, ready for the broadcast now? And then you were like, okay, anti-strat 1, 2, 3. And then it's like, famously, what we all now know about Pronax is the guy, if something's going wrong, just changes the strat mid-round. So it's like, that's all great to have all that stuff, but he can sort of short-circuit that himself, because his style of play has always been to mix things up. What worked so well in that one game then? What was different about that? Were you just second guessing what he was going to do, or did he just run stuff default? What did you think?
I mean, Fnatic just had like EnVyUs. They had a very vanilla CT side. They just, that was back when Olaf would just always play CT spawn, Crims would always play connector, JW would always play window, Flush would always play cat, Pronax would play B, and they would always like fall into the same patterns, right? And I just exploited the patterns. Like, I don't it was like literally just a scrim fest though. It's like, if we make this happen on this side of the map, this rotation's going to happen, and you just run out and you're going to get a 3 versus 1 right here. Like, I don't know if they would ever, I mean, maybe it would work again because they have those rotations built in, like, fundamentally into their setup.
So were all the calls just coming off right? Like, he'd say something like that and it'd happen next, and people in your team were like, okay, we can trust his calls now?
Yeah, it was just like I had the full trust of my team, It was just like, all right, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to like throw this smoke grenade, and this guy's going to pull, and then it's going to create like a weird small gap where Olaf's going to be alone CT spawn, and he might smoke ramp, and you're going to catch up with a smoke out. 3 guys are just going to run out halls. And then at that point, just smoke connector and plant the bomb. Like, I don't know. It wasn't really like we're running strats. I don't know, but it worked good for what we needed to do.
And then if people, in that same series, that semi-final at Face It, which was the third of the 3 tournaments, that was also the one where the second map was Train. And at the time, they weren't like amazing on Train, but at the time, the thing about their Train was, it was like, since Olaf was the best player, he had like a really weird style on that map where he just sort of like one-man entried on the outer site however he wanted. And that was what was really weird about that series, was I remember that was the one where actually a lot of Fnatic couldn't get it going in that game. It was like Pronax who had like the 30 kills or something crazy in the game. What was that series like overall? Was this like the dream to play them and have them all this weird shit going on?
Yeah, I mean, I loved playing Fnatic because, I mean, I don't know, I always find them like pretty reasonable to read. They're not like a Virtus Pro or like a Navi or some shit like that could just like do some crazy like default into anyone entering. Like, they have like 5 lurkers on their team and 5 entries on their team at the same fucking time. Fnatic worked a little bit differently back then, where you kind of knew Olaf was going to get out of team mid, and we knew that if we stopped him, we'd probably win, because he would either be team mid or he'd go Ivy, one of the two, every round. So our main focus was on stopping him and finding out where he was going. And Pronax ended up getting like 50 kills, and we were just like, holy fucking shit, dude. We're about to lose this match to Pronax, not Olaf. It was unreal, man. You think when you have Olaf having the worst game of the summer that you're about to beat Fnatic, and Pronax, of all people, and their team has like 50 kills, That just goes to show like how strong Pronax actually was. People think Pronax was a bad fragger back then. I don't think he was at all.
I mean, he had pretty sick teammates.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get frags though when you're on a team with those players, Like, there's not many frags to come your way especially when you're playing like B on Mirage, or like, I mean, he wasn't necessarily playing like frag hungry eco spots, like.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, while we're on this topic, then I like to if I have a topic that I would like to address anyway, if it comes up, I'll just lead into it. So you kind of brought it up here. So okay, I've got a question for you. So I saw a little clip from a fREAKAZOiD stream, and by the way, I'll just say for everyone who doesn't realize, when people are streaming, not every thought is like super well thought out, or like they haven't figured every single aspect. It might just be a throwaway thought they said, okay. But I remember there was a moment on a fREAKAZOiD stream where he's just like saying like, oh, Sean's super sick, man. Like, you don't know how good this guy's skills are. Like, his aim's really good and all this. And I was like, is it really though? Like, because here's the thing, Sean. Like, you'd have games where you were pretty good. You'd have a half where you were pretty good. But I always say this, okay. A lot of people famously talk shit on Existence, right? Because famously he would like bottom frag a lot of the time. Existence has a lot better land stats than you do for your career. Yeah. Like, he has pretty decent stats. I mean, the thing about Existence is, I mean, he would go in by himself first as like the entry and all this shit, What do you actually think about in CSGO as just an individual player? Take out the in-game leader aspect. Obviously, you might have done things with your game to help being the in-game leader. Actual like in-game skills. Have you ever tried to just be a fragger in any of your teams? Have you ever what do you think of your actual skill set in CSGO? How does it fit?
Yeah, during the time when Corey was calling, that's pretty much the only time I've had in CSGO where I tried to get some frags, and I played pretty well in the couple tournaments we played. It's not like I definitely wasn't towards the bottom of the scoreboard as far as like kills and damage go. But I think my main problem with Go is that I get caught off a lot because I'm talking and doing weird shit, like as far as like looking at my radar and seeing where my teammates are and making sure they're doing the right things. And I get caught off a lot. But I don't think necessarily my aim is worse than like an average pros or anything like that. It's just, you just get caught off a shit ton because of the stuff I'm doing. And it's just, it's definitely what costs me. And I've tried to focus on that a lot. Actually, since joining Echo Fox, I've tried to work on my own game more than anything. I put in long ass days right now to try to make myself get better. And that's what I use streaming for now. Like, people are like, why are you streaming now all of a sudden? It's like, well, I use streaming as like the time that I play for myself, like I'm not playing for my team as far as like watching demos and like doing practice outlines and stuff like that. That's my own time. And then when I'm done with streaming, that's when I put in my time for my team. And that's when I practice after that time. And I mean, I never had those hours in Cloud9, which I think, or even Complexity, like I put in more hours to the game now than ever, for sure, by far. And I think that's why my individual games suffered back then, is because instead of death matching and doing things that I should be doing, like Existence probably puts in those hours. Like, he probably puts in those hours death matching.
Sure, yeah.
I didn't do that back then. Besides like the last couple tournaments or the last tournament where I like DM like 1,000 frags a day before the tournament. I actually did that. I Existence actually is a really good fragger, though. I agree.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I can confirm what you're saying. I've seen him before tournaments come an hour early before the match and just play CSDM the whole time and try and do something individually, So, okay, here's a question I have for you. And this is a question that all North American pros right now are going to think is a really weird question, because I know how lazy a lot of these fucks are. So, do you actually enjoy watching demos to scout opponents? Do you enjoy doing your homework like that? Is it hard work for you? Do you enjoy it?
Hell no, I don't. I don't like. It's not like. I mean, I don't think it's like super fucking enjoyable, but I don't like. I would obviously much rather be like doing something else, right? Like, but
okay,
I've accepted that as my role in the team, and like, I'm gonna try my ass off to make sure that I do it to my best ability. Like, and that's one of the things that makes you the best at what you do, right? Like, I'm sure fucking Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant don't like sitting in the gym shooting fucking jumpers till they can't fucking feel their hands anymore, Like, you're just gonna do it because you want to be the best, and that's what it's gonna take to be the best, is putting those kind of hours in. I'm not saying that I don't like, when I do find a cool strat or like I find a cool setup, something like that. Like, obviously my eyes light up and like I get some like adrenaline surge, like, oh, I can't wait to show my team, and like this is gonna make it so much better. Like, once I incorporate this into our game, that's definitely a feeling I get. But there's a lot of shit things that you watch in demos, like where you're like, dude, this is horrible. Like these teams are just like running kind of defaults almost, and then this guy ends up scrimming a little bit too hard and dies, and I'm not learning anything. Like there's like literally been demos where like I'll be like, fucking A, I just wasted 30 minutes. I didn't learn a fucking thing, you know? Like that was such a waste of time. And then there'll be the demos where it's like, oh my god, I just learned so much. That was awesome. I wish I could do that again for a different match, you know? It's a crapshoot. You never know what you're gonna get, honestly. Because even the best teams in the world, you'll watch them and you just won't learn anything. It's weird.
Okay, so if everyone remembers that ESL Pro League final, on the one hand, it's probably the best result of your career. Like, you came close to winning, you had an awesome run through a really big tournament. At the time, no one expected anything from Cloud9. So from the outside, it looks great. But I'm sure the way the final went had to be very, well, unsatisfying. Because if you remember, the final was like this. There was 4 maps. 3 of them were incredibly close. 3 of them were either 16-14s, one way or the other, and one was in overtime. The only one that wasn't close was FNATIC wrecked you on cash, but at the time, that could happen, okay? So on the 3 that were super close, you lost 2 of them, and as a result, you lost the final. The one that you won of the super close one was the Cobblestone one, which actually, ironically, was the one people probably would have said you would have never won because they were very good on Cobblestone. But then the 2 that were the killers were the Overpass and Dust 2, because those were map 3 and map 4. And if you remember, the way you lost each of them was totally different as well, because Overpass, you had the CT rounds, then you couldn't get the T rounds, and then Dust 2, you had all the T rounds, and then you were at map point, and then they just got like infinite T rounds in a row. Yeah. Tell me about those 2 maps, the Overpass and the Dust 2, and what went wrong on the 2 different sides?
Oh my god, so much went wrong on both sides. Like that was just an experienced team versus like an inexperienced team, honestly. I think we were up like 15-9 on Dust 2, and they came back and won or something. I think that was that match.
Yep.
It was haunting. They just kept like mid-B splitting on us or some weird shit. We tried to adjust by doing like a couple different things, and just nothing we did worked. Like we tried pushing upper B, I think once. I wish we would have done like other shit, to be honest, like get Scala over towards B, or maybe play like a super aggressive in middle and just pray to God you can get like a kill or something like that on them. I think we gave them too much respect, and when they started to come back, it got to the point where we were afraid to make the plays needed to win. Because up until then, the way we got to 59, like I said, was we showed them that we weren't afraid to disrespect them. Like how I had Shroud just rush up middle in that second round. I'm certain it was that match, actually, where it was in addition to like having get Shroud in the game and get him involved, get him kills. I also use stuff like that to like get in the mind of the other team. Like obviously, if you're gonna rush middle against FNATIC, you're gonna show them like they're gonna instantly be like, holy fuck, these guys don't give a fuck. What? They're going to rush mid against, like, no one rushes mid against FNATIC. Like, everyone tries to give FNATIC respect, or maybe not so much anymore, but when you play, like, a Luminosity or something like that, a lot of the times when you play them, you shell up because you think they're so good. They're so strategically evolved that they're ready for anything you do or all this shit, and they're so good. They're going to hit their shots if you push up middle, and you're just going to give them a gun. But if you show a team that you're ready to just disrespect them and rush them and basically get in their minds and make them think that you could be anywhere, it's going to slow them down and it's going to kind of take them off their game. So I tried to do that in Dust 2, and we strayed from that at the end, which is why we lost it. Is we became just a normal team playing FNATIC. It was just, we fell into this bullshit default setup, and I don't know why. I just kind of let us fall into it. It's definitely my own fault. Maybe I tried like slight tweaks, but I should have just done something crazy. I should have literally called some bullshit that would have thrown them off, just to see how it would have worked. So definitely
the way they won this actual series though is funny. It's kind of a precursor to how they were at the end of that era, if you remember, where they had all those crazy like timeouts and then they would do the big comeback. Well, obviously now that team has changed. ProLeague has left. It's quite a different flavour to the team, even if it's some of the same players. How will you remember that FNATIC team? Like, what were they good at?
They're just really good at like holding on their CT sides, honestly, and they're just all good at fracking. Honestly, they could do anything because any of them could go out on a default and get a kill. You know, like that's why it was dangerous playing them at the time. Is you never really knew what they were gonna do because they didn't have that strategic backing that say like a Navi had, or like even like a Virtus Pro, for example. They'll do like an execute against you. Like I didn't feel like I ever felt that against Fnatic. It was just rotation based Counter-Strike. Like it was spreading out across the map, and if any player, they all understand shit. So like if they spread out across Cobble and say like Olaf goes out on top of the plateau on T side and two guys are over at A, and Olaf like hears like 3 grenades pop and then a guy drop like on like say whoever was playing drop back then, maybe it was like JW, I don't even know. Yeah, so like he hears a grenade drop, so like they're like, oh, 4 people are B. And then like Flusha and someone else are over at A. They'll just like start walking through A, you know, like because there's 2 entrances to A and there's one guy there holding both entrances, and they'll do weird shit like that, you know, like they're very cerebral in the game and they don't need strats to like be able to find entries into sites, and that's what makes them so dangerous.
Can you expand on that a little bit further? Because to some people that might sound strange. Like, okay, here's the thing. It's very simple for someone to understand why EnVyUs was super sick on T side, because they literally just had some ridiculous aimers who sort of just 1v1 tried to find a duel, you know. How was Fnatic? Because the thing is, it's not like they had no strats, but they obviously had a very unique approach, right?
Yeah, it's a super unique approach. Like if you play them on cash, it would almost seem like they're scrimming, because you would set up and like, say you weren't playing a 1-3-1 mid on CT side. Say you were playing a 2-1-2 where you had one guy playing mid, 2 guys playing B, 2 guys playing A. And you smoke lower mid, right? Well, they'll have like 2 guys rush over to A on their team and like throw a shit ton of grenades, like just like all kind of bullshit. They'll have a guy at B like fucking around at B pretty aggressively, like Flush will like try to like work up into checkers and look for a kill. And then JW will just walk through the mid smoke during all this ruckus and just like kill one of your guys in the back. And from an outsider, it looks like JW is like doing some outrageous play walking through the smoke, like, but they're using rotational knowledge that surely enough you're going to play a little bit scared when you play Fnatic, and you're going to rotate a little bit harder because they're so aggressive that maybe they will come out of A main. Like maybe they come out of A main once every 3 times and they just rush you in the A bomb site, but this time they didn't. And this time JW will walk through the smoke because he knows that guy that normally plays mid has to like lean towards B or A in some way or another because he's not experiencing anything. So JW will walk through the smoke and get a kill in the back somewhere. And it's like they do that kind of stuff. They're very good at that. It's setting up each other, using noise cues and stuff all across the map.
So one thing I'm always very careful of when I'm trying to do my own analysis, and in doing so I'm trying to like model the game and where do the teams fit against each other and what style counters what style. I'm always really, really hesitant to try and like write a team off entirely, like just be too quick to judge them, you know. And I notice one of the things people always bring up after your run of the 3 second places is they always kind of like, it's like the neat story they tell themselves as to why Cloud9 was never super good again, is they go, oh well, what happened was no one knew Cloud9, and then when they became really good, you know, it was in a short space of time, it was like 3 weeks pretty much, and then after that everyone thought, right, let's watch some Cloud9 demos, and then after that, you know, like they figured them out and it was done after that. Like, yeah, okay, there's a sort of logic to that. Like some of that does make some sense, but that can't be the whole story, because for example, if you get figured out, well, you're going to adapt, you're going to change something up, you're going to move a position, you know. So what's your version? Like what's kind of like the way that you rationalize why you could never get those like finals finishes again with the same players?
I'm trying to think. Like obviously we had some really horrible showings. Like I think some of our players kind of slumped, and
I mean the majors are the obvious ones, right?
Yeah, I
think
think
stage eliminations.
Yeah, the one against I think it was like Kingwin or G2 or whatever. That was like, holy fuck, man. We really threw that game. We lost that like 4 spy at B that we knew that they would do. And I said this on stream where it's funny. We played a lot at that boot camp and we played really fucking well. And sometimes I'll like record demos and stuff like that when I'm scrimming at boot camp. And one of the teams that we played was Kingwin. And I rewatched the demo with the built-in wall hack of CSGO. Like, there's something you type in console, basically, so you can have wireframes and see. So here I am the night before the match with everyone around me. watching a Kinguin scrim on Dust 2 from probably 4 days earlier, right before the major, where they didn't know they were going to play us because it's random drawings. They got randomly drawn.
The redraw, yeah.
Yeah, so we got randomly drawn against a team that we scrimmed 4 days ago on the map that it happened to randomly draw to. And we're watching it with wall hacks on, pretty much. So match goes live, and I'm literally calling like everything. Like I feel like fucking Nostradamus up in that bitch. Like just literally calling everything. Just it was ridiculous. But they would just they would bust into sights, man. They were on fire that game. I don't know. We couldn't stop them. And even when we stacked that B bomb site on the eco round, is like Jordan probably shouldn't have thrown a flash because he should be relying on my flash and trust the fact that my flash is going to blind him. But instead, he threw his own flash. The guy then saw his flash, accidentally turned for my flash because they were both thrown at the same time. And then he got one shot. Well, and the B site just collapsed, kind of thing, and people died in unaware ways. And I think so. It's weird. If you asked me in the time, I would have said we kind of just collapsed and we played like shit and people played stupid. But looking back, I think we weren't practicing as hard, so like we weren't getting in as many scrims, and it got to the point where brands, I guess, kind of like took over. Like people, I'm not gonna say like we like cared more about brands and stuff like that, but from my perspective, it didn't feel like we fully cared as much as we once did, and we weren't scrimming as much. We definitely weren't scrimming as much as we did prior to the summer. And I think it eventually caught up where we weren't in that zone like we were going into summer, where we had the proper amount of in-game time compared to the out-of-game time, like I mentioned previously. It became very lopsided towards the out-of-game time and less so towards the in-game time.
So towards the end of Cloud9, I mean, I referenced this earlier, but even back before 2015, like 2014, when Hiko was going to leave, etc. I mean, I referenced back then that it was already something you'd thought about in the past, like maybe I'll just quit. I mean, at the time, I remember you even said something to me like, if you really thought it'd been better for the team, maybe you would have just become the coach. Maybe you would have let someone else become the player, and maybe that's a way that you would stay involved, but you wouldn't have to be a player. And maybe you're going to retire as being a player. But obviously, you stuck around for 2015, and at the end of 2015, you quit. So at the time, when it was implied like maybe you'll just become a coach or whatever. So when you finally retired from Cloud9, that made sense to me, because I was like, okay, you know what? You had you gave it a good run in Cloud9. You gave that 5-man lineup as much time as it could get. Like, it's unlikely things are going to drastically turn around. Probably needs a fresh lick of paint, as it were, like a new in-game leader, new players, which is what they've got now. But as a result, I thought to myself, right, he's probably just going to retire entirely then, because kind of like the Hiko thing, like, what's the point in playing more years if it's going to be for a worse team? Like at that point in time, you want to win. That's what keeps you going, or you just retire. It's one of the two. So out of nowhere, because I'd heard all these stories that Cloud9 like offered you everything under the sun, like please stay, be the coach, do all the rest of it. Why was it never an option to become the Cloud9 coach? Because you had hinted at that previously, like you at least thought about it, right? So what made you think I don't want to be a coach?
I don't know. It felt like I wasn't happy playing towards the end of Cloud9, and that being a coach, I would literally be in the same exact scenario. It was just I wouldn't be playing. It was like I had a realization basically, maybe in the middle of November, because I think I even told the guys after the major where we lost to Kinguin that I was going to step down, and I literally told them maybe right after. Maybe actually even before, I don't know, that I was going to step down. And then after I told them I would coach, right, at that point. And then after the Cluj major, I told them I wasn't going to coach. It was like from major to major, I kind of switched. Like I was going to coach. And then after the Cluj major, where it became evident that Get Right wasn't going to join and all this shit was going down, I was like, I'm not going to coach. Like, was
that like a key thing for you? Like that would have like revitalized you if you could have Get Right replace you and you're the coach of the team?
Maybe like it definitely would have helped a lot, because I think Get Right would have brought some kind of motivation into the team, as far as like he would have relit a fire under everyone. I'm pretty sure, like from talking with him, he doesn't seem like someone that's going to be complacent and want to ever not win. Like, he always will seem like he wants to win from talking with him. And I think having that on the team would have kept me motivated for sure. But once I realized that that wasn't a possibility, and like the route that it was going to go down, it wasn't a place where I could see myself being happy with in the future. So I decided to step down. And yeah, like you said, I actually was going to just stream. Like, I was literally just going to stream and work on like a side project, start like a different kind of company up related to esports. But it got to the point where I was getting offers from all these teams, and something that I always, literally always during my time on towards the end of Cloud9, I was like, I mean, I think any in-game leader would have to think this, and maybe even any star player, they'd have to think, I wonder if I could do this with 4 other people. Like, it's not even like a, I don't know, it seems like cocky and kind of crazy for me to say that, and I know it's going to be perceived in the wrong way, but I mean, I think a lot of coaches probably feel this too in professional sports. Is like, you want to know that your calls as an in-game leader or your strats that you design, you want to know their value, you know, like, and
like the strat works even if it's not Shroud shooting the AK.
Exactly. And there was always that kind of question and like kind of thought lingering in my head, you know, like, I wonder if my strats are actually kind of what's like all right. And so, I mean, I didn't really have that desire to make a team. Honestly, I was going to stream. I took like 2 months off, and I started getting all these offers from all these teams, literally in like every team in North America. And it looked like Echo Fox was basically an organization that would give me almost full reign of a roster and just allow me to like shape and mold it as players became available that I wanted. And I could kind of build like a new team, like a new young talent team around me, and just with all the roles that I ever wanted, and no preconceived like friendships that would hold me back from like getting rid of anyone. It's like a fresh start almost, you know, like not joining like, I'm not saying that they even asked me, but like not joining like a Liquid where, you know, like, sure. I don't know if like Nitro and Elige and at the time like Fugly, I don't know if they're like a trio that like I could never get rid of, and then I just have like one place, you know, like what if one of those guys doesn't fit the system? And you know, you just don't have to worry about that if you have full reign of a brand new situation.
Does that mean that this is like, so like you're saying, like you reset you get a reset of all that stuff? Does that mean it's like a different seangares in Echo Fox then? Like you're gonna just build, like you're saying, if a player doesn't fit the role or whatever, you don't have to worry about friendship. If you need to, you can remove this player, and you're going towards some sort of goal. Is this a different mentality? Yeah,
I think so. I mean, I've already made a few roster changes for sure. Yeah, if people don't fit, I mean, I've kind of like made changes. It's a very different thing for me because I hadn't like cut anyone like ever, really. Like I've only cut like 3 people prior to Echo Fox. I like cut like 3 people on Echo Fox. So I think the roster that I have right now is pretty fucking good, and it's actually crazy. We signed on for practice yesterday, and I was like, oh my god, it feels so fucking awesome playing on a team that signs on and everyone is just like ridiculously warmed up. Like, dude, if I could tell you like how our practices went yesterday, you wouldn't even believe it. It was insane. Everyone just came on like so on form for a Sunday, like midday. Like everyone's like so warmed up because they're just grinding out rank S's all weekend, like playing their asses off. Like they're doing their job, and you know, like I'm doing my job as an in-game leader. You know, like it's nice. Like it's definitely nice. And I'm not saying Cloud9 never had that, but it's something that started to like fade, I guess, towards the end. You know.
Okay. Do you have a final message or any parting words for anyone at the end of the interview?
No. Yeah. I just want to thank you for having me, and thanks for Echo Fox for allowing me the opportunity, and all my fans that support me by stream and YouTube and shit. Dream's real. Dream's alive.